This is KPPQ LP Ventura, 104.1 FM, and we're in the Women's Room, where we appreciate and support each other. I'm your host, Kathleen Good. Our poets tell us where we are and where we are going. They use words that bear the emotions and clarify society's ills with their stanzas. I am pleased to introduce to our listener a new poet on our local scene, Angelina Leanos, who happens to be the newly inaugurated Youth Poet Laureate for Ventura County. We're so happy to have you here today, Angelina.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. I asked Angelina to be on the show because the creative process of the poet is a mysterious one to me, and I'd like to know more. Through her process of creating a poem, she turns raw emotion into words, and these words, in turn, by some sort of language alchemy, makes me see images in my mind and feel the emotions the words convey. I'm going to ask Angelina to talk about her artistic process as a poet when she reads two of her poems for our listener. But before we do that, let's just talk about what you are doing right now. Start with your recent inauguration as Youth Poet Laureate. What is your mission and how long will you be local laureate?
So I will be the local Youth Poet Laureate until 2022, when there will be another poet inaugurated. But I will also be publishing my own book the following year, so I'm really excited for that. My mission as Youth Poet Laureate, of course, is to really represent my community. So this county, with the experiences that many of us go through, whether it's social justice, environmental justice, or even personal things like love and self-love. Those are just a few things I love to write about, and I really want to advocate for our people, as well as spread joy and really inspire with my poetry.
Okay. Now you're also attending college and you're in a very special first time program. Could you fill our listener in just very briefly about the Americorps program? I just love this idea.
Yeah, so I'm a student at California Lutheran University, and I was very fortunate that CalLu was chosen as one of just a few schools across the country for the Americorps program. So essentially, we're doing community service to really help underserved communities with social justice and also achieving higher education. And in turn, we'll be receiving some tuition help, which is really helpful.
Oh, so do you plan to teach?
Yes, I actually have had a few opportunities to expose myself to the high school level and do some coaching, some teaching. So that's one of my passions, definitely.
And you're studying English and psychology. Why psychology? Does this subject add insight to your poetry?
Definitely. I've been really interested in psychology since I took a course in high school, and I find it really fascinating how we can learn about ourselves and what really shapes our experiences in this world. And that's something that I love to explore in my poetry, seeing the world through different people's perspectives and portraying different experiences, and also advocating for mental health. So that's why I love psychology so much. We can learn about ourselves.
Okay. And how long have you been writing poetry?
I've been writing poetry. Well, I'm a writer at heart, so for many years, but I really got involved in poetry and the poetry community in 2018 when I was in junior in high school. And that was when I joined and competed in a competition called Poetry Out Loud. And since then, I've been really involved.
So you've done quite a bit in the performance art of poetry reading. I wonder if you could tell your listener about some of your experiences.
Yeah, so a little more about Poetry Out Loud. It was really a life-changing experience for me. As in high school, I was a really shy person and I had a lot of stage fright. I was afraid to share my writing and my voice. But with Poetry Out Loud, we got a coach to help us with recitation and performance. His name is Fernando Leanos, and since then he's been just a wonderful, wonderful mentor and friend. And with this competition, you're reciting other people's poetry, but in a way that you make it your own. And so I really found my voice and confidence through this. And the first year, I actually won both at the school and county level, which was amazing because I got to compete in Sacramento at the state level and meet
Wow.
so many other talented people. So it was really life-changing for me. And since then, I've just been in love with poetry.
Oh, wow. And you're also involved with California Poets in Schools. Tell us briefly about that.
Yes, so California Poets in the Schools is an organization that works to help poet teachers and poets across the state. I'm a member, but also on the board of directors for Cal
Oh,
Poets, which is really wonderful. We work to hold quarterly open mics and provide services for our poet teachers. So it's really a wonderful organization.
would you give your listener one tip that you picked up about performing poetry?
Oh, absolutely. I feel like I could share so many tips. But one of the most important ones I've learned is to really make a poem, whether it's your own or someone else's that you're reciting, and make it your own with your voice to really bring emphasis and emotion into everything you're saying and really understand what the message of this poem is. And once you really get into it, you can bring that message and emotion through your voice. And that's what makes it so amazing to listen to.
Yeah, and you really have to concentrate on every word and feel that word.
Oh, yes.
Uh, Would you also give an example or two about how you use your poetry to bring a voice to issues in the community?
Yeah, as I briefly mentioned, I love to write about different topics. So, social justice and environmental justice are two big themes that I've been writing about more and more recently. And so, I just love to advocate for human rights, but also just bring awareness to, climate change and personal experiences that we need to have more awareness for.
Okay. Do you have dreams or goals for your poetry?
Yeah, I think as any artist or poet, the biggest dream or goal is to have your work kind of live on and have this legacy after you. So that really what I just love to hear is when people are inspired by my poetry or they really connect to it. But actually, one goal I did have, and I've of course been able to achieve it now, is to be Youth Poet Laureate for the county. I've been applying and hoping for this since the program started in 2018. So I feel so honored and grateful that I have this position and title now. And I want to make the most of it, of course, to really raise my voice for this community and really spread the joy and beauty of poetry throughout.
Well, that's a wonderful goal, and congratulations
Thank you.
on your appointment. Perhaps now might be a good time to read your original poem, I Am an Invention. This theme of self awareness of a woman's power is one we really like to celebrate here in the women's room.
Some people question me. They see me as nothing but a pair of limbs made only to procreate and breathe oxygen. Or they dare to mention that as a woman, I must have been fabricated to please them, to please men, but please, man, I'm more into women than I am into you. You see, I'm not a possession. I am an invention, worthy of gold medals and ribbons spun with the finest thread. The hands that made me were kissed by the gods. I function to bless the earth, and in turn, I give thanks to the sky, because when I leave this life, I will take my seat in heaven's kingdom. So for now, dare to call me whatever you will. I will prove you wrong in everything I do right.
Okay, that was lovely. So, did you develop this poem over a period of time?
So this poem actually I wrote during quarantine. So pretty recently, within the past year, I had a lot of time to self-reflect on my role as a woman in this world, but also how I perceive myself. So that is how this poem really came to be.
And do you like write it all at once, or do you think of a few lines and then you carry on with something else, and then another thought comes to you and you write it down? Is that how you work, or do you just get it all out there?
My writing process usually varies. With this poem and with most of my poems that I share, they come very naturally and stream of consciousness almost. So I'll write without pausing, just kind of getting all my thoughts and feelings onto the page. And once I find a place that I feel really satisfied with, then I'll pause, maybe take some time away from the page, come back, and that's when I'll edit. But most of the time, I find that I work really well when I just get it all out in one go.
Okay, so um, I like the way you include the people in your life as also being creators of you, whether they impacted you positively or negatively. Could you talk about that a little bit? I like the way you include the people in your life as also being creators of you, whether they impacted you positively or negatively. I wonder if you could speak to that for a moment.
Yeah. So when I say in this poem that I am an invention, I like to think that I'm talking about how people in my life, along with myself, really have an impact. So, of course, I'm building myself up and sometimes breaking myself down with life experiences. But there are a lot of people who come into my life and have similar impacts, whether it's my parents and the way they raised me, or friends who really show me what true friendship and loyalty are. So, negative or positive, I like to take experiences I learn in my life and really understand how they affect me and impact the person that I become. So when I say I'm an invention, it's really a collective inventing process of people that I really perceive.
Okay. So you also use some religious images in your poem. Maybe you could talk a little about your interest in religious symbolism.
Yeah, so I grew up in a Catholic household, and so religious symbolism is really important, especially to my grandmothers who are very Hispanic and Catholic. And the image of angels and heaven, especially with my name,
Oh, yeah.
and just this wonderful place that we can kind of live on. So I find it really fascinating how these symbols can really mean a lot and bring a lot of faith and hope to so many people. So I like to incorporate them in my poetry sometimes as ways of exploring those ideas and really showing that they can be beautiful and bring hope and beauty to a poem as well.
Okay. Another recurring theme in your poetry is the earth, environmental justice, and climate change. And you've also written another original poem, The Earth is Also Alive. And I'm going to have you read that in just a minute, but we need to do station ID. This is KPPQ LP Ventura, 104.1 FM, and we're in the women's room where we appreciate and support each other. I'm your host, Kathleen Good. There is a new poet on our local scene, Angelina Leanos, who happens to be the newly inaugurated Youth Poet Laureate for Ventura County. Angelina is here to talk about her artistic process as a poet and to read two of her original poems for our listeners. And we're back. And I'd like to have you read your original right now. The earth is also alive.
They say that water is a body, but forget that the earth is one too. Her heartbeat is too often mistaken for the sounds of cars and sirens. At night, if you listen closely, you'll hear it beating earnestly like a wave of 2 a.m. nostalgia. Only when we sleep is the earth at peace. I've known her since I was a child, playing in the strawberry fields where my grandparents once spent hours bending their backs just to lift up their children. I was always taught to respect both of my mothers, though Mother Earth never speaks in words. Instead, she speaks through the rumples of her belly and the whistles from her cherry red lips. Every gust, a hush. Every tide, a lullaby. Listen when she calls you to embrace her. Soak in every inch of nature's beauty, the fields, her ribcage. Every strawberry, a blood cell growing in abundance to fuel her corazón. We are not the only ones fit to live in this universe. La Madre Tierra también tiene cuerpo. Too often she is ignored by us. When we turn to our phones instead of out the window and dig into our meals instead of our gardens, we must look out for the signs when she cries for us. After all, La Madre Tierra no habla con palabras. So I hope you know that while you dance in the rain, she is only trying to make you aware of her pain.
Okay, thank you very much. I really like the lines where my grandparents once spent hours bending their backs just to lift up their children. I was always taught to respect both my mothers. Could you talk about those lines?
Yes, of course. So I really love to pay homage to my grandparents who started off, working in the fields as many immigrants, especially from Mexico, begin their life here. And so that's really a theme that I love to include in my poetry. And as for respecting both my mothers, I think a lot of us, if not all of us, are raised with this notion that your mother is the one you always respect and you honor her because she is the one who brought you into this life.
Mhm.
And so my mother is someone I always look up to. But in another sense, Mother Earth is another image that I always hold in my poetry because this world is also a part of our life and shapes our life. So we have to respect the world as much as we respect the people within it.
Okay. So, your attitude of appreciation for the beauty of the earth, do you think you developed these because your ancestors earned their living from the earth? And you also played there. As a line in your poem says, you played in the strawberry fields. Would you tell us where these images come from?
Yes. So my grandparents have always kind of lived near natural elements, so kind of by the strawberry fields, and then they moved to a flower nursery where there was so much greenery and
Oh,
beauty around. So um, that's really where I developed this idea that home is not just a place, it is a feeling, it is this belonging that we have on this land. And so, you know, I appreciate and see the beauty in the world, especially during the pandemic, because we impact the world just as much as the world impacts us. So we kind of have to take care of it in that sense and really understand how amazing it is to just live our lives and have so much beauty in the nature around us.
Okay. I wonder if you also would talk a little about the suggestion in your poem that Mother Earth is telling us she is in pain. Now, how does that pain manifest itself?
So I think it really manifests in all these changes in climate and environment that we're seeing. So fires in winter is something that would have been unheard of, 10, 20 years ago. And now they've become so normal. And also with the droughts, not seeing as much rain. So I think this kind of pain and notion that we are damaging the world in exponential ways, especially with technology developing. So I think that manifests itself in ways that may seem subtle, whether it's, a slightly warmer summer or really big changes in our weather. So I think we definitely have to pay more awareness to how our world is changing.
Right. So, did you write this poem with the younger generation in mind or all generations?
I like to think that I'm addressing all generations. I know that the younger generation will eventually inherit, this world and have to continue the work to taking care of our earth. But I think we all need to really be aware of how we are impacting the world in our carbon footprints and pollution, all of that. And
Hmm.
especially because younger generations, I think, are raising more awareness about it and advocating for it, but older generations still hold most of the power. So we all have to come together and unite to
Right.
really take care of our natural world and make sure that we're doing the best we can to protect it.
Right. You see yourself with your poetry as influencing, the people who have the power. So, do you find that your friends, members of your generation, are personally concerned about climate change? Do they talk about it?
I would say so, and I should hope so, but I know that me and the people I associate with, friends and community members, are very passionate about this work and just serving our community, protecting our beaches, our land, our natural resources. So I've definitely been inspired and influenced by them. So it's really amazing to see how just this community alone can be really passionate about these things. And so, yes, I would say that, we're all very passionate about
Right.
this.
And you've all sort of studied about the environment, climate change, the ocean in, throughout your schooling, correct?
Yes, definitely. That's a big theme that we'll learn about. So it's really important to hold on to what we learn and continue learning so that we can do more as well.
Okay. So before we wrap up, where can people find your poetry? Where is it available?
So currently it's not available. It's not easily accessible just because I don't have a website or a published book yet, but I will be publishing my own poetry book in 2022.
Ah,
So in the meantime, I'm active on Instagram. There's also a Facebook page for the Youth Poet Laureates of Ventura County.
oh,
So me and the two former Youth Poet Laureates will probably be adding information on upcoming events. And I also hope to establish a website soon where I can really put more poetry and updates of any events I'll be involved with. So definitely keep an eye out for that.
okay. So on Instagram, what would your is it handle the word? Would it
Yes,
Angelina Leanos?
yes, it's
Yeah.
just my name. Mhm.
And what is the address for the Facebook page?
I don't have that information as
Ventura
of yet.
County Youth Poet Laureate probably would be
Yes,
a good
it
place
should
to
come
start.
up if you search that.
Right. everyone have a lookout for Angelina's work. You can reach her on Instagram. Okay, thank you so much, Angelina, for coming in today to talk about your life and your poetry. We've been talking to Angelina Leanos, our very own Ventura County Youth Poet Laureate, who read and discussed two of her original poems, I Am an Invention and The Earth is Also Alive. This is KPPQ LP Ventura, 104.1 FM, and we're in the Women's Room, where we appreciate and support each other. I'm your host, Kathleen Good.
This is KPPQ LP Ventura, 104.1 FM. I'm Kathleen Good, host of In the Women's Room. In the Women's Room is a show focusing on women's issues, women's concerns, and women in the arts. In the Women's Room is where we appreciate and support each other. Tune in Monday, 8 a.m., Tuesday at 2 p.m., Wednesday again at 8 a.m., and Saturday right there at 1 o'clock. Kathleen Good here to talk about CAPS Radio KPPQ. If you thought radio is old tech, guess again. Radio is the leading reach platform. 93% of us listen. We like the local feel and personalities. KPPQ is commercial free, no tethers to corporate influence on our content. Our mission is to educate the public. 104.1 FM near the center of the dial, and CAPS Media is Ventura's Center for Information.